Brentford are on a high after the weekend demolition of Manchester United. But how are they shaping up against the mythical beast that is second season syndrome? Welcome to Dearly Departed, and there's no surprise after hammering Manchester United 4-0 at the weekend that in our weekly poll, you guys wanted me to talk about Brentford. Now, I'd love to climb aboard the Manchester United bashing train and, well, bash them a little bit more. But let's be honest, there is more than enough of that going on. Everybody knows that Brentford have been run far more sensibly over the last handful of years than Manchester United. And I don't think that's the most interesting tale to tell. I would rather look at what Brentford's start means for their chances this season. And will they avoid the oft-mentioned second season syndrome? Before we go into what second season syndrome is, whether it exists and if it does, will it apply to Brentford? Let's just make sure we're on the same page here. I know from chatting to fans of teams who have been promoted that they can get a little bit defensive about the mention of the second season syndrome term. Look, you know me, I'll try and be balanced. Football myths do exist, and some fans do throw the term around without really applying any context or any thinking. And yes, that is very annoying when it applies to your club. But I do think it's always worth diving in and examining the validity of these things before calling BS on them. In the most simple terms, second season syndrome refers to teams who get relegated in their second season after promotion. Before we figure out why, let's actually have a look at who has done this. I've gone back and checked out the last 60 teams promoted in the 20 seasons prior to Brentford going up. So, how many of the 60 went down in their second season? Let's get some audience participation here. Have a think about your answer. While you're doing that, hit the like button and support the channel. And when I tell you, get in the comments and tell me how close you actually were. The answer is 8 out of the last 60 teams promoted went down in their second season. That's 1 in every 7.5 or 13.33% of the last 60 teams, 20 seasons, promoted to the Premier League were relegated in their second season. To add another layer of context then, how many do you think of the last 60 teams promoted went down in their first season? Well, 25. That's 1 in every 2.4 teams promoted, or 41.66%. With the obvious caveat that a team relegated in season 1 can't be relegated in season 2, that's still over 3 times as many teams in the past 20 years relegated in their first season than in their second season. Now, without wishing to state the bleeding obvious here, promoted teams are clearly the highest at risk of getting relegated. If we add our first and second year relegations together, we get 33 out of 60. And now we're over half, and under 1 in 2 teams that go up will be relegated by year 2. These teams, by definition, have the lowest position going into every Premier League season. And in these days of super TV deals, they've also received significantly less in terms of income than the teams they're all of a sudden going up against. So look, I will take a pot shot at the notion of second season syndrome. If there's any syndrome, it's surely promoted team syndrome or first season syndrome rather than second season syndrome. Anyway, even if second season syndrome as a concept is a bit of a myth, can we learn anything from those 8 teams that did drop in season 2 after promotion? There's 3 teams in that 8 that fit what I call a boom and bust narrative. What goes up must come down. Reading went up in 2006 and then finished 8th, got relegated the next season. Birmingham went straight up to 9th and then finished 18th and were relegated the next season. Sheffield United, very recently, I'm sure you'll all remember, 2019 they went up, finished 9th and then bottom. The whole boom and bust thing is a prevalent theory in nature and economy. It says if growth is too steep it becomes unsustainable and then tends to be followed by a crash. I think that applies to those 3 teams. And more importantly for this video, I don't think it applies to Brentford, as their growth has been gradual enough not to fit this idea. The other 5 of our 8 teams who went down in Season 2 after promotion all finished in the bottom 5 in their first season before dropping in their second season. 2 finished 16th and 3 finished 17th. So it's just 2 places or 1 place above the drop, and perhaps fit the "it was coming" narrative. Obviously, every situation is unique, but Brentford don't fit either of these narratives, having built gradually in the Championship and landed in 13th. Maybe that's the sweet spot. Is it? Well, 3 other teams in our last 60 to go up finished 13th in Season 1. They all survived the next season. Watford dropping to 17th in 2017. Fulham dropped to 14th in 2003. Birmingham actually went up to 10th after finishing 13th in 2003-2004. History seems to suggest that a team in Brentford's situation over the past 20 years is likely to survive their second season. Let's look at some specifics though. The club is stable, and the manager who took them up and guaranteed their survival is not only still there, but he never gets linked with either the sack or leaving for a bigger job. Yes, Christian Eriksen was an absolute star in the second half of last season, and he's gone. Honestly, that's probably the biggest negative in the whole tale. Star striker Ivan Toney is still there, as are 5 other players who started more than 30 Premier League games last season. 4 of those 5 are under 30 years of age. The last issue surrounding Brentford and possible second season syndrome is the strength of the league. If the quality of the bottom half rises and Brentford's quality drops, obviously the gap between the Bees and relegation gets smaller. Are Fulham, Bournemouth and Forest an improvement on Watford, Norwich and Burnley? You know what? Probably they are. Particularly Norwich and Watford didn't take many points off anybody last season. Also, could some of the other survivors below Brentford last year improve? Possibly. I'm looking at the likes of Villa and Leeds. But then maybe someone who finished above Brentford last season could tank and even that out. So, in short, the idea of second season syndrome and the concept does feel a little bit like a media and fan-generated soundbite that doesn't actually have too much reality attached to it. And yes, Brentford could still struggle, but they don't seem to match a lot of the characteristics of teams before them who have dropped. Oh, and by the way, if you hadn't heard, they beat Man United 4-0 at the weekend. If you enjoyed this episode of Dearly Departed, why not stick with the channel? Click here to see last week's episode on Fulham and Alexander Mitrovic. And you can click here to see where exactly I put Brentford in my pre-season 1 to 20 Premier League predictions.